Season 4 of Doctor Who aired from the 10th of September 1966 to the 1st of July 1967. This was the season which created one of the most fundamental parts of Doctor Who, regeneration. William Hartnell's last serial, outside of the Three Doctors special, was The 10th Planet, and Patrick Troughton took up the reins as the Time Lord, and a brand new era began. In total, there were 43 episodes which spanned over 9 serials. The last pure historical serial, until 1982 that is, took place in this season, and these were The Smugglers and The Highlanders. The Highlanders also introduced the longest companion to date, Jamie McCrimmon. Like the season before it, the majority of the season remains missing due to the BBC's junking policies. Not a single serial remains complete, although quite a few has been animated in the recent years. The producer for this season was Innes Lloyd, and the script editors were Jerry Davis and Peter Bryant. The Smugglers. The Smugglers was the first serial of Season 4, however, it was the last serial to be created as part of Season 3's production schedule. It was written by Brian Hales and directed by Julia Smith. The 4 episodes featured on location filming at Cornwall, which was filmed to produce some of the early behind-the-scenes glimpses. All 4 episodes of this serial are permanently missing, with the occasional clips or particularly violent scenes surviving. These clips only exist because the Australian Broadcasting Company cut out the violent scenes of the episodes before broadcast, with only the cutscenes surviving various junking efforts. This serial, although not generally well received by the general public, has been talked about by cast and crew very positively, with both Annika Wills, Polly, and Michael Craze, Ben, naming this as their favourite story to film. The director was chosen especially due to her familiarity with the Cornish coast, and remembered her time on set fondly, especially her work with William Hartnell. William Hartnell was remarkable. As a director, you work out actors' moves before going into rehearsal, in order to get a variety of shots. I remember asking William Hartnell to cross the TARDIS and press a particular button, and he went raving mad. I can't. If I do that, this'll happen to the TARDIS and that'll happen to the TARDIS. It was obviously so real to him. He'd committed himself to the character and acquainted himself with all the machinery, which in those days was very much simpler than it is now. The plot revolves around Captain Avery's treasure that a number of pirates are trying to find. Now, the new Who episode The Curse of the Black Spots serves as a very loose prequel to this story, with the Doctor finally meeting Captain Avery himself.
Are ye truly a Sawbones?
I would prefer you to use the correct term, sir. I am a doctor.
Well, Doctor, you had best start using your cleverness.
Following on from the end of the previous serial, The War Machine, Ben and Polly are very surprised to find themselves not only transported to Cornwall, but in fact into the 17th century. Although at first the Doctor is angry that they have stowed upon, he quickly warms to them and decides that they should all go exploring. They all come across a church on the cliffside, in which resides a very suspicious warden, who sends them to the nearest inn with a very cryptic riddle. While the Doctor, Polly and Ben are settling into the inn, the warden is murdered, and the prime suspects are the 3 strangers that saw him last. The murderer, Cherub, kidnaps the Doctor after knocking out Ben. As it turns out, the riddle was the location of Captain Avery's treasure, and now some rogue pirates want to get it. Cherub and the warden once served under Captain Avery with the Captain Pike. The warden stole the treasure, and now the only person that knows what it is supposedly the Doctor, who is being interrogated by the remaining pirates. Eventually, they agree to give him part of the treasure if the Doctor helps him find it. Meanwhile, Ben and Polly are locked up in the local jail, but Polly devises a plan to use supervision to help them break out and rescue the Doctor. If they attempt to prove their innocence, but in the process, Polly gets captured by Cherub and Ben gets lost in the local caves. The Doctor makes friends with one of the pirates, and with his help, escape in order to convince the local squire of Ben and Polly's innocence. Meanwhile, a young man named Blake finds Ben and they rescue Polly. Blake suspects that the local squire of working with the pirates, and he has been getting them let away with many crimes. Soon, our trio all meet up once more, with the Doctor informing Blake that the pirates are going to sack the village if they do not find their treasure. This prompts Blake to leave, intending to raise a small army of defenders to stop the pirates. While the gang are trying to resolve the riddle to get to the treasure first, Cherub bursts in on them and holds Polly at gunpoint in order to attempt to get the Doctor to share the answer. At that moment, Captain Pike reappears, and it turns out that Cherub was trying to steal from Pike, leading to the 2 duelling. Pike wins and lets Polly and Ben go as long as the Doctor stays. They find the treasure and are about to celebrate when Blake returns with his men, stopping the pirates while the Doctor, Polly and Ben escape into the TARDIS.
Are you one of these smuggling rogues after all?
No, of course not, but it leads right down to where the TARDIS is.
The TARDIS? What's that, a ship?
Well, sort of, but you wouldn't understand. Anyway, it's there, all ready for us to get away.
So, The Smugglers was that second last historical serial that went out, and probably one of the ones that kind of drove the nail into the coffin of the historicals. It wasn't bad, it was just sort of forgettable, middle of the road, bit meh. It was a pirate adventure, similar to how the Gunfighters last season was a western rip-off or a western homage. Then you've got The Smugglers, which is a kind of pirate rip-off or a pirate homage. And that's why, I think probably why at the end of it, the historicals are really on their way out. Because instead of becoming about history, like they were in the past, for example, with the Reign of Terror and the Massacre and that sort of thing, they were becoming into like romps, which is a lot closer to what they would become in the future, obviously with different aliens. But for a pure historical, it was alright. It was shot in Cornwall specifically to take advantage of the views and the cinematic picturesqueness of down there. However, because it is missing, we don't get any of that. All we have is the audio, which again, I think this story is one of those stories that suffers because it's audio only. If it was visual as well, I think it would really excel. Because of that, I think this one just kind of was forgettable. If it was, like, being able to watch it, I think it would be a lot better. The 10th Planet. The 10th Planet is one of those serials which sees so much of an impact on the show that it would be near impossible to demonstrate how much. Outside of the first generation, it is also the first serial to have another of the Doctor's famous enemies, the Cybermen. It was written by Kit Pedler and Jerry Davis, directed by Derek Martinez, and made up of 4 25-minute episodes. The final episode of this serial is currently missing, although numerous clips exist in various formats. The regeneration scene exists, but the rest of it has been animated. A number of scenes were also recreated for the 2017 episode Twice Upon a Time. The only reason that this regeneration scene exists is due to its use on Blue Peter. The only other time that William Hartnell would reprise his role was in the anniversary episode The Three Doctors, although he would be too ill to film in person, with his Doctor only appearing over the TARDIS scanner. In fact, in episode 3 of this serial, the Doctor does not appear at all, which is due to William Hartnell actually being too ill to work. This did not cause as much havoc to the filming as the writers knew that Hartnell was not well, and deliberately wrote it in a way that could be changed if such a thing happened. This means that the last episode that survives the Doctor's era does not actually feature William Hartnell as the Doctor. When discussing the transformation between William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton, the producers released a memo describing its effects. It is as if he has had the LSD drug and instead of experiencing the kicks, he has the hell and dank horror which can be its effect.
Emotions, love, pride, hate, fear. Have you no emotions, sir?
After dramatically escaping from Cornwall, the TARDIS lands in the South Pole near the Snowcaps space tracking station. When they step outside into the freezing cold, the scientists at the pole quickly usher them inside, and they are subsequently asked why they are there. After being put in an observation room, they discover that the year is 1986 and space travel is becoming slightly more commonplace. Their conversation is cut short when the ship Zeus 4 radios in with a distress call. They have been drawn off course, and with no idea how it has happened, when scientists discover another planet between Mars and Venus. The Doctor recognises the planet as Earth's twin, Mondas, and now he is worried about the invasion. Meanwhile, a mysterious spacecraft lands at the pole, and a robotic-like creature kills 3 men out of the ice. As everyone tries to help the stranded Zeus 4 by launching Zeus 5, the robotic creature invade the base, killing those who try to stop them. They declare themselves the Cybermen, and they are used to be humans from the planet Mondas. The Cybermen are holding the entire base hostage and refuse to let anyone help Zeus 4, which ends with all of the crew dying in an explosion. The Cybermen intend to use the Earth's energy reserves as their own planets have been drained. By absorbing the energy from Earth, it will be destroyed in the process, with the Cybermen taking the humans on Earth to Mondas. Ben successfully kills one of the Cybermen and helps the leader of the scientists, Cutler, kill another 2. With all the Cybermen in the base gone, Cutler warns the Space Command throughout the world of the attack and finds out his son was one of the men on Zeus 5. The Doctor soon collapses, reeling from exhaustion. While Ben and Polly look after him, Cutler decides the easiest way to stop the Cybermen is with a series of nuclear bombs used to explode Mondas. Ben explains that the Doctor believes that Mondas will explode itself when it absorbs too much energy, but Cutler is simply not listening. The bomb would also kill a number of people on Earth due to the resulting radiation, so Ben and Polly sneak away to deactivate it. When it is about to be launched, the engines fail and Cutler is driven mad with his rage and grief about the apparent death of his son on Zeus 5. He tries to attack the Doctor and is killed by more invading Cybermen. The Cybermen take Polly as a prisoner and demand that the bomb is moved before they will agree to negotiate. The Doctor, still ill, takes control of the place of Cutler, only to find out that space control has also been taken over by the Cybermen. Ben, while working to get rid of the bomb, realises that the Cybermen might be intolerant to radiation, which turns out to be true. A standoff between Ben, the radiation, Cybermen and Polly ensues. Just as they were expecting, the power is being drained from the Earth, it destroys Mondas and disintegrates the remaining Cybermen. Zeus 5 appears, alright, and manages to land. Polly is rescued and together with Ben tries to get an ailing Doctor into the TARDIS. He collapses onto the floor, changing in a shine of bright light, and when it fades, he is replaced by a younger man. The 10th planet is, how could I even start to explain it? There's just so much in here that kind of defines the rest of Doctor Who's history. You've got this introduction of the Cybermen, first and foremost, and a base under seas story. So two things that are already about to continue on. The Cybermen replaced the Daleks, so obviously the Daleks were taken out because they were hoping to go do one-off episodes. They were going to be appearing twice in this season, but after that it was a long time before they came back. I think it was 5 years in total after this season. It didn't come back till 1973. So they were like, okay, we need a villain to replace the Daleks in terms of iconicness and scariness. So they came up with Cybermen. Now, I talked about fears of artificial intelligence in the previous video, whereas I think this riffs off that. So you've got the fear of cyber technology, so like replacing parts of yourself with other parts that didn't kind of belong to you. So you've got the first heart transplant took place in 1966, I think. So it was round about this exact same time that sort of things was like dominating the news. Like, look what happened. They managed to change a heart from a different body to another thing. That's when the kind of fear of what happens if you change your body come back to, and that's why you got this technology fear, and that's where the idea of the Cybermen really shines through, and I think Kit Pedler did an amazing job in realising that in particular. So you've got that, which is a great villain. They're set in the South Pole, which is also great. It's a little bit in the future. So Ben and Polly have that. We're in the future now. So they went into the past in the previous one, but now they're in the future. But the most important part of this serial has got to be the very end of it, where William Hartnell collapses in his TARDIS and changes to Patrick Troughton. Now, this was the part of the Doctor Who that basically made it be able to last as long as it has, and what allows it to still keep going after everything else has failed. It's the generation. And I think the fact that it just works so well, listening to the kind of behind the scenes and how they did it was essentially they had two black boards and they had to line the faces of William Hartnell, who was lying on one board, and Patrick Troughton, who was lying on the other, and they had to line them up absolutely perfectly so they could superimpose them on top of each other using actual film reels, and that's how they created the effect of their first generation, by essentially saturating it so it was too bright and then bringing it back down and merging those two faces together. And then you've got that beautiful kind of special effect of him changing from 1 to 2. I think just watching it, it's amazing in terms of special effects. Of course, the Cybermen are a little bit clunky, as they always are, but in particular, it's just so good to see how they managed to pull that off, because they could have just showed up one day and just replaced the lead actor. That had been done many before. Because they put an in-universe explanation for it, it created this spiral effect. It made it just keep going, and for that I think The 10th Planet is a must-watch for anybody that's interested in Doctor Who. The Power of the Daleks. The first outing of Patrick Troughton saw the reappearance of the Daleks in the form of The Power of the Daleks. It was written by David Whittaker and directed by Christopher Barry, and all 6 25-minute episodes are currently missing. It was also the first Dalek serial not to be written by Terry Nation. something that reportedly Nation was not happy with. It is also the only Troughton Stories run not to feature Fraser Hines, who would join the cast in the next serial. Also, technically the story takes place after the year 2020, which was only credited in the trailer for the first episode. On the 50th anniversary of the serial's first episode, a completed animated reconstruction of the episode using the original audio was released. This was also recently colourised.
Ben, remember what he said in the tracking room? Something about this old body of mine is wearing a bit thin.
So he gets himself a new one?
Well, yes.
Do me a favour.
With a strange change in front of him, Ben and Polly are very confused, with Ben starting to believe that he is not the Doctor at all. While in a state of confusion, the Doctor wanders outside and comes across a dead body and takes his badge. Ben and Polly try and chase after them, but collapse due to the fumes from the planet's mercury pools. They wake up after being rescued by Quinn, the Deputy General of the planet Vulcan, and Bragan, the security head, when he mistakes the Doctor as the Examiner due to his stolen name badge. The Examiner was sent to investigate a mystery capsule, but when they enter, they find 2 dormant Daleks and a mutant creature scurrying across the floor. The Doctor believes that scientist Letterson has taken out one of the Daleks and warns that even if a little bit of power could bring them back to life. While Ben, Polly and the Doctor discuss who called for the Examiner and killed him, Letterson performs experiments on the missing Daleks, accidentally reactivating it. After removing the gunstock, he presents the Dalek to Quinn, who is convinced that they could help the colony. The Doctor's pleas to destroy the creatures are ignored, which comes to fruition later when him and Ben are investigating the capsule and the Daleks reveal that their plan is to take over Vulcan and remake Skaro. While Lesterson still believes that he has power over the Daleks, the Doctor and Ben discover that Polly has been kidnapped by a resistance unit in the colony and that Quinn is under suspicion for the murder of the original Examiner. After exposing Bragan of the murder, the Doctor realises that the Daleks are using manufacturing machines to make more Daleks. Once Bragan escapes, he uses his military power to establish martial control, which causes the Daleks to spring out amidst the chaos, planning to conquer the planet. Through sabotaging the original power source to the capsule, the Doctor powers down the original Daleks, destroying the recently made ones and throwing the entire colony into chaos. The Doctor, Ben and Polly sneak away, all too aware of the mess they leave behind.
Well, there are 3 Daleks in here. What's happened to the other one? Doctor!
The power of the Daleks is less, I feel, a Dalek story and more a Patrick Troughton story or a 2 story, because it's less about the Daleks trying to cause trouble in some place or other, but rather it's a story about what's Patrick Troughton going to do as the Doctor, what is his take on the character, who is 2 as a person. So basically he comes out of the TARDIS, he's confused, like a lot of Doctors are post-Regeneration, and he comes across a dead body and he picks it up and he starts stealing things from it and he just causes chaos where he goes. He's got a little recorder and a tall hat and he acts like a coward and an idiot, and basically we're sitting along there with Ben and Polly going, who is this guy that is just kind of, he's nothing like the Doctor, he's running away from things, he's acting like an idiot thing, and then you realise further on into the serial he's doing this on purpose to try and make people underestimate him, and then you get a pretty clear idea of what his Doctor is going to be, a very moral character. So whereas you had the first Doctor who was more interested in research and exploration than he was in anything else, that's what led him to do things like try and beat someone up with a stone and fisticuffs and that sort of thing. Whereas you have 2 who's a very moral, straightforward character who's like, yes, I've got to focus on ridding the evil and changing that, and people underestimate him because he's small and he seems a little bit weird, and he's dressed as a cosmic hobo, again to give that impression. I just feel like it's a brilliant introduction to the character. The Highlanders. When The Highlanders aired on the 17th of December 1966, it marked the last of the pure historical serials. It consisted of 4 episodes and was written by Elwyn Jones and Jerry Davis, directed by Hugh David and produced by Innes Lloyd. It also introduced a new companion in the form of Jamie McCrimmon, a young Jacobite soldier played by Fraser Hines. Jamie would go on to feature in every subsequent story with the Second Doctor on TV. All episodes are missing from the BBC archive and only the audio remains. The Highlanders was the first serial to be completely discarded, which occurred a mere 2 months after it was broadcasted.
Look, he's probably got money and we need it.
You can't mean to rob me.
You and your kind have robbed our glens. Look, he's got food. Chicken and bread.
Great. Now, my gallant officer.
I've done you no harm.
It's no thanks to you that my father and Jamie weren't hanged. They're probably rotting in jail in Inverness by now.
The TARDIS arrives near the battlefield of Culloden after the massacre in 1746. In a nearby cottage, a number of members of the Clan MacLaren are hiding out and tending to their wounds. Ben wanders off and Polly and the Doctor are forced to follow him out. They find the group in the cottage and set about helping where they can. That is where they meet Jamie McCrimmon, a piper who is just trying to help his family, and Kirsty, the lawyer's daughter. Polly gets separated from the Doctor and Ben, with the latter being captured by the Redcoats until the Doctor pretends to be an obscure German doctor. While the men get taken to Inverness and thrown in jail, the girls are trying to make their way safely through a moor swarming with soldiers. They string up a Redcoat and steal as much money as they can from him before running to Inverness to save the boys from being shipped to Jamaica. Unfortunately, the ship sets off before the girls can get there, but the Doctor is left behind. Ben escapes by being thrown over the side of the ship and he swims to shore, meets up with the Doctor and rows out to break the other prisoners free. The Scots take over the ship and make their destiny France instead. Polly and Kirsty row over to the ship where Kirsty joins her family before the Doctor asks Jamie to join them in the TARDIS.
Where's your friend?
Polly, I don't know. Safe, I hope.
I cussed you through the well out of it.
But I mean the Doctor. I don't know. He'll be here, don't worry.
Yeah, in a wee moment it'll just be too late.
Silence, you two!
Here it comes, my absolute favourite story in this season, and it's The Highlanders. And it's, I love it so much. I think that if anybody's watching this that has any control over animations, give us The Highlanders next, please. I really, really want it. I have a lot of, problems with the way Hollywood and thingy demonstrate or put across the Jacobite Rebellion of 1746, and especially recent programmes that shall not be named, Outlander. What we have in this serial, The Highlanders, it's just great because you've got this very, very, at the time, uptight English show. That's basically the best way to put it. And when they go up to Scotland during this, my first thought is, oh yeah, they're going to be like dotting around with the Redcoats. They're basically going to go with because you got to bear in mind that the Redcoats weren't only English, quite a lot of them were Scottish too. So it's not an English versus Scottish war, it was a Jacobean versus Georgian war. It was a rebellion and that sort of thing. And I think they managed to get that across in a way that's really, really well done. Kind of shows the horrors, dreadfulness that came with that, and even quite a lot of things were mentioned by the Doctor, all the horrific things that happened after the clearances and the banning of the language and the Highland dress, which Jamie wears. And also, I don't actually think I mentioned that, this is an introduction for Jamie McCrimmon, which is the longest serving companion, I believe, to date in terms of episodes. He's in every single serial bar one of the second Doctors. So he is such a good character, and he's such a himbo, for lack of a better word. The Highlanders are such a good introduction to him. So on the whole, The Highlanders is one of these ones that I could probably talk about in depth if anybody wanted that, about how I can appreciate it compared to other Jacobite media. The Underwater Menace. The fifth serial of Season 4 was The Underwater Menace, which aired over 4 episodes from the 14th of January to the 4th of February 1967. It was written by Geoffrey Orme, directed by Julia Smith and produced by Innes Lloyd. The serial is half missing, with the second episode existing in the form of a telerecording. Telerecording was a method of recording TV episodes by positioning a film camera against the television. This telerecording is the earliest surviving one to exist. Episode 2 also ends the longest run of missing episodes in Doctor Who, with 12 episodes in total. The more scary clips from this serial still exist thanks to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation censoring rules.
Kill those 2 men! Nothing in the world can stop me now!
While Jamie is appreciating the TARDIS interior, the ship arrives on the shores of a volcanic island. When exploring, they find a small elevator, which as soon as they get in, starts descending, causing them to fall unconscious. When they awake, they find themselves in a compression chamber, where they are fed and watered by hostile guards with spears. Turns out the group are going to be sacrificed, but before they can, the Doctor suggests that an old acquaintance, Dr. Zaroff, was there. Right at the last moment, Zaroff rushes out and stops the sacrifice, with Ben and Jamie being sent to the mines, with Polly being unknowingly sent to become a fish person. Zaroff takes the Doctor away, and through the conversation, the Doctor figures out that they are in the lost city of Atlantis. While the Doctor is causing chaos in Zaroff's laboratory, Ara, a saving girl, sneaks in and saves Polly from being turned into a fishman and takes her into the cave. In the mines, Jamie and Ben decide to break out with another couple of miners. The Doctor becoming more and more concerned with Zaroff's plan and decides to speak to the leader Rammel about it, but before Rammel can do something, Zaroff takes over, declaring that the Doctor and Rammel should be sacrificed. Before they can be killed, they escape, meeting up with Jamie and Ben from the mines and Polly and Ara from the caves. They hatch a plan to create a strike and throw the city into a famine to stop Zaroff's plan. When Zaroff realises the city is crumbling around him, he reveals his plan was to destroy the city anyway and take the world with it. In order to stop Zaroff, the Doctor realises that he has to flood the city and tries to evacuate it using Ben and Polly's help. The city floods, trapping Zaroff when he tries to continue his plan. The fishermen are freed and all the gang pile into the TARDIS.
So you're just a little man after all, Doctor, like all the rest. You disappoint me.
You disappoint me, Professor. I didn't think a man of science needed the backing of thugs.
Have a care, Doctor. Your life is in a balance.
The Underwater Menace is kind of like The Smugglers in the way that it's a little bit forgetful, if I'm honest. I can remember two big things about it, and that is those fish creatures that were like swimming across. They had the big eyes and they had the scales and they were wearing like shelled costumes. But the second thing I remember is Professor Zaroff, who you could not forget once you laid eyes on him. Absolute chaos, played it to about 100. It was like playing a pantomime villain of sorts. And you've got this character in the middle of Doctor Who, and it's just so big and it's so chaotic in that way that you weren't really expecting. I don't really have much to say about the Underwater Menace other than, I don't know, it was a bit odd as well. It was kind of stilted. You had this extremely over-the-top scientist character, whereas you also had like people worshipping gods. Comparison between those two was a little bit strange. On the whole, it was fun but not great, if that makes sense. The Moonbase. The Moonbase was the 6th serial and saw the Cybermen appear once more as the villain. This was the start of numerous serials in which the Second Doctor faced off against the Cybermen. It was also the first serial to be set on the Moon, which was suggested by producer Innes Lloyd in order to capitalise on the interest on the ongoing space race. A mere 2 years later, man would first walk on the Moon. It consisted of 4 episodes, of which 2 and 4 exist. The remaining episodes were animated in 2014 for the DVD release. The serial was written by Kit Pedler, directed by Maurice Barry, and produced by Innes Lloyd. When Kit Pedler was asked to write the serial for this season, straight after the 2nd episode of The 10th Planet, it was before Fraser Hines was a permanent fixture in the TARDIS crew. Because of this, he spends most of the serial incapacitated. Pedler was also tasked with writing a story with only one large set and a few small sets, which also began the base under siege trend that was so popular throughout Troughton's era. Although it has been criticised as a remake of the previous Cybermen serial, it is also the unique comparison to see the differences between the two Doctors.
They get us every way, these creatures.
I refuse to believe that. Everything's got a weak point. It's just a question of waiting until it shows up, that's all.
Once they land on the Moon, instead of Mars where they were destined, Ben and Polly want to explore further. Jamie accidentally knocks himself out, with his body being carried towards a moon base on the surface. When the rest of the group join him, they find that the year is 2070 and the people are controlling a system which affects the weather on Earth. The people are all slowly falling ill with some sort of mysterious illness. Although Jamie is still ill, he sees a robot creature marching towards him before collapsing. Polly sees a robot leaving and realises that it is a Cyberman. The Cybermen are taking the bodies of the ill people through poisoning sugar, all while causing the weather machine to malfunction. The men that have been taken are being converted into Cybermen, and in order to stop them, Polly comes up with an idea to use corrosive liquids to melt the plastic cyber panel. The Cybermen take over the minds of some of the remaining workers, forcing them to control the weathering machine to alter gravity, but the affected workers are stopped. The Doctor realises that the weather machine can be used to change the gravity on the Moon. It works, which sends Cybermen and their ships floating off into space. Before the workers can thank the Doctor, he has disappeared back into the TARDIS, taking his friends with him.
Well, that's taking care of the Cybermen.
The Moonbase is basically the exact same story as the 10th Planet. It's got a very, very similar premise, and the way it carries out is really a study not on the villains or on the humans, but rather the way the different Doctors handle it and the different companions as well. So you've got Ben and Polly, who were both with the Doctor at the 10th Planet, and they were with the Doctor here in the Moonbase. But now you've got Jamie onto the mix. Jamie spends a lot of this episode actually unconscious because it was written before he was taken on as a main character, so there wasn't really much for him to do. So you've got it's essentially a character study on how the two different Doctors approach those two different matters, with the second Doctor being far more cooperative and scientific, whereas quite a lot of the first Doctor is hostile and just runs around calling people idiots until they do what they want, getting people all railed up into trying to kill each other. Whereas the second Doctor works in a lot more friendly way. He kind of builds bonds between the people that they're working with, and I think that works to his advantage, and then that's really shown here, a demonstration of how the second Doctor can make friends, and that's very much continued throughout his era, which was never in the first Doctor's era, and then you've got that kind of friendliness going through it, and it's a great comparison between the 10th Planet and the Moonbase to see how that kind of plays out. The Macra Terror. The Macra Terror is the completely missing 7th serial of Season 4. It was written by Ian Stuart Black, directed by John Davies and produced by Innes Lloyd, while consisting of 4 episodes. This is another of the serials which have been fully animated, which has been released in both black and white and in full colour. This was the first of the animated episodes to change parts of the original story, including the scene from the end of the Moonbase, removing a makeover scene in which Polly's hair is cut short, showing the entire Macra instead of the singular puppet, and removing a final scene of the entire TARDIS crew dancing out. The Macra Terror is the last 4-point story to be completely missing, and was also the first story to show the Doctor in the title sequence, a practice that would continue on to the end of the classic series in 1989. The next time the Macra would feature in an on-screen Doctor Who episode would be almost 40 years later in Gridlock with David Tennant as the 10th Doctor.
And say, that's very good. What do you call it? The Highland Fling. Well, why do you call it the Highland Fling? Because we finished the dance by flinging ourselves out the door. Oh, that's very good. Come on now.
The Doctor, Ben, Polly and Jamie arrive at an extremely regimented colony on an alien planet, where they help arrest a young man named Medoc who's been causing chaos. To show their gratitude, the pilot invites them to stay and take a taste of their hospitality. However, it quickly becomes apparent that all is not what it seems. The Doctor breaks into Medoc's cell and realises that the colony is being controlled by a mysterious creature under the ground, who appear as giant crabs. When Ben, Jamie and Polly are sleeping, a strange gas invades their room. Although Jamie and Polly are safely rescued from it by the Doctor, Ben is wakened a little too late, thereby being under control of the colony. Due to the interfering with Medoc, the Doctor, Jamie and Polly are forced to work as hard labour in the Danger Gang. Jamie gets separated down in the mines and when overwhelmed by gas gets attacked by the crab creatures, named the Macra. He narrowly escapes but is immediately captured by the pilot of the colony and arrested once more. The Doctor convinces the pilot they are all being controlled by the Macra, and once exposed, with Ben being relatively back to normal, they explode the Macra using their own gas, freeing the colony from their interference.
You know what happens to people that say that?
But
Now we can deal with you all together.
Did the pilot see them?
Yes, I saw the
It is
Macra.
forbidden to say that. Don't let him say that he has seen Macra.
I saw you. You are the Macra.
Silence!
The Macra Terror was animated a number of years ago. This was the very first animated serial I ever watched. I watched it in colour. I pre-ordered it before it came out, and I watched it because the Macra were one of those villains that fascinated me. So when I heard it was coming out, I went, I need to get that. And I watched it and I loved it the first time. So that was about, must have been about 5 years ago or so. And so I watched that at first, and of course revisiting it with watching everything leading up to it and seeing how kind of the characters played off each other and other modes really made me love it a lot more, especially the relationship between Ben, Polly and Jamie, which this is kind of the last adventure because Ben and Polly, they leave in the next one. So you've got those trio of friends that they clearly love each other very much, and they're all kind of together, and when one of them is kind of lost, the other two have to keep going on, and it's a fascinating dynamic to watch. And it also shows how, once again, the Second Doctor can make friends with pretty much anybody, because he just instantly befriends I'm prisoner, and then it just goes absolutely haywire. So I think that's one reason why the Macra Terror works so well. Quite a lot of the animation was taken liberties with, so in the original serial they only had one prop of the Macra, so it had to be reused over and over again. However, they animated it with loads. They basically took what was limited in the serial and changed it so it was unlimited in the animated version. They also cut some bits, like a makeover scene where Polly got her hair cut short. She just comes out the TARDIS with her hair cut short, and I think that these kind of things work in favour of the episode because it's basically making it a bit more bigger, or like the scope of it's bigger, and also kind of cutting out unnecessary padding. The Faceless One. The second last serial of season 4 waved goodbye to the characters of Michael Craze as Ben and Annika Wills as Polly. It exists of 6 episodes, 4 of which are missing. These missing episodes have been animated in black and white. It was written by David Ellis and Malcolm Hulke, directed by Jerry Mill and produced by Innes Lloyd. There was also a new arrangement of the theme song to pair with the new title sequence, which was produced by Delia Derbyshire. This particular arrangement was used until The Horns of Nimon in 1979. A character named Pauline Collins, played by Samantha Briggs, was originally intended to be a new companion, but the actress turned down the opportunity. Briggs would reappear Doctor Who 40 years later as Queen Victoria in the episode Tooth and Claw.
It's a flying beastie!
When the TARDIS arrives on the runway, Doctor, Ben, Polly and Jamie get separated while running away from a plane coming into land. Polly finds herself in a hangar for a company named Chameleon Tours, where she accidentally watches a murder take place. Terrified, she flees, with a murderer chasing after her. Polly finally finds the Doctor and Jamie, and when she decides to see them to take the body, she is kidnapped by the murderer who has been following. The Doctor and Jamie find that the body has been electrocuted, and with Polly missing, they decide to go to the Commandant of the airport for help. Unfortunately, this does not go well, with them being interrogated instead. Ben eventually meets up with them and becomes enraged that Polly is missing, determined to investigate the Chameleon Tours for himself. With Ben investigating the hangar, Jamie watches the front desk where he makes a friend in Pauline, a girl whose brother went on a tour and disappeared, while the Doctor tries to convince the Commandant to investigate. Pauline has decided to buy a ticket and leave on a Chameleon Tour to find out the truth, but Jamie steals it and goes instead, hidden in the bathroom. From the ground, the plane that he was on ends up disappearing. The plane has actually left the atmosphere, docking with a spaceship and taking all the passengers and miniaturising them. The creatures behind Chameleon Tours are taking young people under the guise and taking over their likeness in order to invade Earth. They realise that the Doctor is smart and tries to take him over in order to exploit his brain. However, they end up tearing themselves apart over suspicion and lies, with the duplicates disintegrating when the transmitter is destroyed. The people that had been miniaturised are returned to normal. Ben and Polly realise that it's the same day as when they left, so they decide to stay behind. However, the TARDIS is missing, and they have no idea where it is.
Are you sure this is the right room, Doctor? Jamie, have you ever known me to be mistaken? Aye. Hey? Now watch out. What? That's the wall the gas nozzles came out of. Well, there's nothing here now.
I was really sad to have Polly and Ben leaving. I didn't realise quite how attached I'd got to them until they left in The Faceless Ones, because they're such a good pairing and I think it links back to how good Ian and Barbara were as a pair. They were a pair, they were together, like they might not have been together at that point, but as a duo they were bouncing off each other and they were opposites of each other. She was obviously history, he was science, it kind of bounced off, and you had that same dynamic with Ben and Polly. Obviously they were both much younger, but she was kind of hip and sciencey, whereas he was a sailor and rough and Cockney accent, all that kind of stuff. and it was that kind of bouncing off each other is what I really, really liked. And so I think there was no wonder why I didn't kind of go in and got attached to it. In the same way that Susan and Vicky had a relationship with Ian and Barbara, I think Jamie had the same but almost equal friendship with Ben and Polly. So it wasn't just kind of the Doctor losing their friends, it was them too. And to see that was fascinating. It's just such a good relationship between those three in particular. In terms of the actual story itself, I watched the animated version of this too. Other than that, it was quite a good story. There wasn't really that much, it wasn't brilliant, like it wasn't an absolutely outstanding story, but it was a fun story to watch. It was pretty good, and I would definitely say it's not one to skip. It was good. I enjoyed it. The Evil of the Daleks. The final serial of Season 4 introduced the newest companions to the TARDIS team in the form of Victoria Waterfield, played by Deborah Watling. This 7-episode finale was written by David Whittaker, directed by Derek Martinus, and produced by Ernest Lloyd, and was intended to be the final episode featuring the Daleks as the main antagonist. Terry Nation hoped to produce a spin-off featuring the characters in the US, meaning the Daleks would be absent from the programme for almost half a decade. This was also the first time that the Dalek Emperor was shown on screen, although he'd been in comics and short stories for a few years before this. Only 2 episodes exist of this serial, so once again it was fully animated in both colour and black and white.
The early bird catches the worm, Jamie. Now, do be quiet, there's a good chap. And for heaven's sake, don't knock into anything.
The Doctor and Jamie are trying to figure out what happened to the TARDIS when they find themselves investigating an antique shop, which has a lot of authentic Victorian artefacts. They are lured into a trap where they are gassed and transported back in time to a country house in 1866. The man who kidnapped them, Waterfield, explains that the Daleks are holding his daughter hostage until they do what the Daleks want. They want to use Jamie as a guinea pig to do some dangerous tests in order to extract the essence of mankind, until Jamie wanders away and makes a friend with a man named Kemmel in order to break Victoria free. Through observing Jamie's attempt to rescue Victoria, Doctor notes that the essence makes him human. The Daleks want the human factor in order to make them invincible. However, when it is applied to some of the Daleks, they become more playful, like toddlers. These Daleks become almost friendly with the Doctor, and he names them Alpha, Beta and Omega. Then the Daleks want to reverse it and remove the human factor from everyone on Earth, making anyone into a mental Dalek. The Doctor refuses, and everyone is reunited in the same cell. They trick the Daleks into going through the door, applying the human factor instead of the Daleks factor, throwing Dalek Command into absolute chaos. The infighting reaches the Dalek Empire, which causes Skaro to start imploding. Unfortunately, Victoria's father and Kemmel are killed in the escape, leaving the Doctor and Jamie to adopt their new friend and leaving the TARDIS.
You seem to be well acquainted with the creatures.
Everything you say, Waterfield, is true. If we cannot find Jamie, the Daleks will take pleasure in killing everyone in sight. And their greatest pleasure will be in killing me.
The Evil of the Daleks is another animated one, except this time it has the introduction of Victoria. Now, Victoria wasn't a character that I was particularly attached to. I don't think before this I hadn't watched any of her serials whatsoever. I was far more invested in Zoe's serials, which was a later season. But Victoria, I was excited to get to know, and the first half of this serial I didn't enjoy it. It felt like it was struggling on a little bit. It was getting a little bit too convoluted. I was sitting watching it going, don't really know if I like this. But then it picked up in the second half with Jamie being the ideal candidate for a human being in terms of bravery and loyalty and love and that sort of thing, and how the Doctor used Jamie's bravery and loyalty and love to destroy the Daleks at their own game and kind of save the world from it. So it was a very novel approach to destroying the Daleks. Instead of like just blowing them up or destroying something that ended up getting rid of them all, it was actually something quite trickstery, which works really well with the second Doctor's character because he's that cosmic hobo and he causes problems on purpose, and that really, really fitted in well with his character. So again, I think that was a pretty good serial and it worked well to both his character and Jamie's, who went through the serial just brashing about trying to save everybody, which really drove in the point that he's loyal and hardworking and that sort of thing. And then Victoria was delightful. People I think give ragging her quite a lot about how she's just a screamer and that sort of thing, but she wasn't. She was very resourceful, and most importantly, which I think people look over quite a lot, is that she was so loving and she made sure everybody was okay and was looking after everybody, even though when she had just lost her father. And I felt like that is one of those situations that people don't appreciate emotional intelligence just as much as they appreciate actual intelligence or brawn. And I feel like with Victoria, Jamie and the two, you've got that perfect balance. You've got strong emotional intelligence, you've got strong mental intelligence, and you've got strong physical intelligence. So you've got that brawn, that muscle you need. And between those three, you've got an absolutely perfect little trio group that absolutely adore each other. And I think that's what really makes me look forward to season 5 in particular.